Good morning. Oh, I got some energy in here. It's your hump day, right? It's Wednesday. So I feel like I'm primely positioned in the conference week because you've been fed all of this information over the last 2 days, and your brain's probably almost full. But hopefully you'll remember the Wednesday in the middle of like all of the great information that we have for you today before you get into the home stretch through the last of the week. So my name is Erin Chappell. I'm the General Manager for Windows Server, and it is my pleasure to be here today to talk to you about both Windows Server 2016, but also what's coming next and the future of Windows Server. So today, we really have 3 objectives in the session. The first is to talk about what's new with Windows Server. And there are 2 pieces of that, right? We're about to celebrate our first year birthday of Windows Server 2016. We launched it at the show last year. And we've been very excited by the adoption that we've seen across the physical layer, the virtual layer, and as well with containers, which was introduced new with Windows Server 2016. But even though we've been excited and amazed at how much people have embraced the technology, we know that server also takes a little while, right, to make it into deployment and into production in your environment. And so we thought it would be good to start by talking a little bit about 2016, the principles of it, and what we're seeing from a customer point of view in terms of success. And then we're going to talk to you about the future of Windows Server. I always get the question, is there going to be another version of Windows Server? I'm here to tell you yes. In fact, we announced this week that version 1709 will be available next month for all of you. And that continues our journey that we've started on the semi-annual channel release that we'll talk a little bit more about. And so we'll talk to you about some of the things that are coming in it, but also how we think forward to the next long-term servicing channel release of Windows Server. And then lastly, throughout the presentation, we'll really infuse and talk about how Windows Server is the foundation of our hybrid cloud strategy and the importance of Windows Server both on the host, on the physical machine, but also in the guest in terms of the application, and particularly with containers. So that's a little bit of the roadmap of the next 75 minutes. So let's start by taking a look back at Windows Server 2016. Windows Server 2016 was our most cloud-ready server operating system. And there were really 3 areas that we focused on investing in. First and foremost was built-in security, right? We know in today's world that security is just top of mind for every enterprise that I talk to. And so with Windows Server 2016, we introduced a number of new features that really help you when it comes to protecting your infrastructure. The first was the work we did around protecting identity with just-in-time, just-enough administration, as well as the credential guard features that we inherit natively by being part of the Windows operating system. The second was what we did around securing the virtualization platform through shielded VMs and our ability to encrypt the virtual machine. And I'll talk a little bit about a customer case study of how they're using that. And then lastly, again, because we're Windows, we inherit all of kind of the basic built-in functionality that was delivered with Windows 10 to secure the enterprise. So device guard, all of kind of those native functionality is just built in. The second pillar that we had in Windows Server 2016 is around Azure-inspired infrastructure. And I like to highlight here that Windows Server is the operating system that Azure runs on top of. And that gives us a huge advantage because we're able to really understand what it takes to run data centers at scale. Right? I mean, think about the scale of Azure and the Azure fabric that exists. And we can take ideas and technology that we prove in the cloud and bring it into the on-premises space for you to be able to leverage in your data centers. And so the work we've done around software-defined storage, around software-defined networking, as well as kind of all of the enterprise-grade features like storage replication, et cetera, that we've built into the platform that come with Windows Server 2016 really provide the foundation of that pillar. And then lastly, the hybrid application platform. If there were one pillar on here, this is probably the one I'm the most excited about, just because of the speed at which this is moving, right? As people think about building cloud-native, cloud-born applications, they're really thinking about how do they leverage containers and microservices and this agility of developer dev operations in order to be able to modernize their application platform. And so the thing that I think is really exciting about what we've done with Windows Server is this provides a great bridge as we think about the existing applications that you have in your organization and how you can modernize them and take advantage of some of these new kind of DevOps style deployment and agility without touching a line of code. And we'll talk again a little bit about how one of our customers is using this. So let's start. Let's go right into the customer case studies that we have. So the first one I want to talk about is around security. So Rackspace. Many of you in this room are familiar with Rackspace, very large-scale hosting provider. They are built, a large percentage of their business is built on top of Windows Server hosting. But one of the challenges that they've had in the past in closing the deals with their tenants and their customers is really this idea that the data that's in the virtual machine is not protected, right, from admin access. So if you're an admin on the host machine, right, you have access into that virtual machine that's running on top of it. And so they have a lot of clients for regulatory reasons, compliance reasons, et cetera, that are nervous about moving into that hosted space as a result. So what they've done with Windows Server 2016 is taken advantage of our shielded VMs functionality. So this allows them to encrypt the virtual machine that's running on top of their host infrastructure so that they can attest to the fact that they don't have access into that virtual machine that's running. So their administrators can't look into that VM, can't look into the data that's in there. And that's been a help in closing those deals. The other thing is that it puts the power in the hands of the tenant or their customer, so to say, in that they actually hold the keys, the encryption keys to that virtual machine, as well as they can use the host guardian service to be able to attest that when that virtual machine spins up, it's running on top of trusted fabric and the known fabric, and so they have that built-in security as well. So this is just one of the benefits that's in that security pillar, but one of the things that we're seeing, not only with Rackspace, but with a number of other customers. So I'd encourage you to check that out. This isn't a scenario just for hosted customers. You can also take advantage of it in your enterprise for roles like Active Directory, right, where you have sensitive information that's in that virtual machine that you want to make sure that's encrypted. The second area I'd like to talk about is around storage and what we're doing around software-defined. Here, the case example is a large government agency. They're responsible for doing investigations into various cases that exist. And one of the things that happens with that is they actually end up seizing a set of devices that have data on it. And they need to preserve that data, and they use it, right, in their case investigation. And so there are several challenges that exist today. One, it's a large amount of data, right? More than a petabyte of data in some cases that they actually have to store and then access. And that access is happening across many remote offices that are distributed, right, across a geographic location. And then lastly, because each case is independent, that data needs to be isolated. It needs to be isolated from each other so that a person working on one case doesn't have access to data on another case. And so there's some complexity in terms of just the requirements of this infrastructure. And so this agency is using Windows Server 2016 Data Center Edition. They're using a lot of the built-in features like storage replication in order to deal with replicating that data across the geographic locations that they have. And they're using virtual machines to store that data so that there's a boundary in terms of being able to not being able to access information right across. And then lastly, they're using the built-in storage spaces direct feature with an 8-node cluster in order to provide that reliability, resiliency, and then quick access to that storage. So really, a great example of how the built-in capabilities that come with Windows Server can really enable these scenarios in your environment. And then lastly, so before I go there, one of the things that is critical to powering the software-defined infrastructure features of Windows Server 16 is the hardware. Right? Oftentimes, I talk to people and they're like, well, it's all software now. Like, the hardware becomes less important. Well, no. The hardware actually becomes more important, right? Because we take advantage of features that are in the hardware, and it means that that system needs to be put together in such a way, right, that you know that the networking works with the storage, it has the right set of resiliency, the right firmware is installed, et cetera. And so last year at Ignite, we talked about how we were embarking on a new program called the Windows Server Software Defined Program. I'm excited to say that we've launched that earlier this summer with a number of key partners, many of which are in the expo and have examples of that hardware on the showroom floor. But what you can know is that with Windows Server Software Defined, we've proven out, right, that when you purchase a solution that is Windows Server Software Defined, it has been tested, it's been validated, it's gone through all of our certification to ensure that it will run the Windows Server 2016 software-defined workloads. And we've also created a handy little poster. I know this is an eye chart, but you can go online and download it, that really talks about all of the pieces that go into that solution. And you can see in the bottom a number of our partners who we've been working with to really provide that solution. So lastly, what I want to talk about in terms of just customer examples is the application space. And so here again, I bet you if you think about it, you probably have tens, if not thousands, of existing applications running in your environment, many of which might be running on Windows Server 2003. Yeah, I see a few smiles out there where I know that you guys still have, and they're probably actually your most critical applications, right? And so here, by BRK, what they did is they have about 2,500 micro apps that make up their customer-facing apps that represent kind of application development over the last 30 years. And so they leveraged our MTA program that is a partnership with Docker and Avanade to be able to take those applications and containerize 22 of those micro apps inside Windows Server 2016 with Docker. And it took them less than a week to do that. Right? So this is a great example of how easy it is to take your applications, existing applications, bring them forward onto a modern infrastructure, be able to take advantage of the security features, et cetera, that come built in with Windows Server 2016, and really modernize your underlying infrastructure. So great example here. And so as I mentioned, the reason why Windows Server and these investments that we're making are so important is that Windows Server 2016 is really the basis, not only of our on-premises deployment, but also Azure as well as Azure Stack. And hybrid is super important. As we talk to customers, we hear back that 80% of enterprises see themselves operating in a hybrid mode for the foreseeable future. So while cloud is critical, and it enables an entirely kind of new set of scenarios for you, we know that you will have on-premises infrastructure in your organization for a long time to come. And that is one of the things that at Microsoft I think sets us apart from a differentiation point of view, is that because we have Azure in the public cloud, we have Azure Stack in terms of bringing those Azure services on premises, and we have Windows Server for our kind of traditional on-premises deployments, we provide you, right, with that consistency and that ability to both leverage your existing investments as you think towards where you want to go in the future. And we really want to be that bridge that helps you move forward on that. And for us, consistency is not about connectivity. Consistency is actually at the API level. It's about, hybrid is not about connectivity, it's about consistency. And that consistency is at the API level. And so if you look at it, we design our services inherently to run the same, whether or not they be in the cloud or on premises. And that is across the space of identity, of management, of our data platform, of our unified development process, of what we have with containers, et cetera. And so with that, I'd like to invite Will Grease up on stage. Will is a PM who used to work in the Windows storage team, now works on the Azure File Sync, and he's going to walk you through one of the new services that we announced this week that really is a great example of how we want to help you leverage your existing investment in your infrastructure, right? And then bridge that to the cloud so that you can take advantage of these hybrid scenarios. So with that, I'll hand off to Will.
Thank you. Thanks, Erin, for the kind words. So Azure File Sync is a great new service we have as part of Azure Files. And it really enables you to centralize your file services in Azure Storage without giving up the benefits of your on-premises file servers. We do this by caching the file server data in multiple locations when you have the actual data source being out in Azure Files. And this enables us to do fast access, and enables you to use all of your same applications and usage patterns that you have with file servers today without having to break your existing patterns. And one of the really cool things about this is because the file services are now centralized in Azure Storage, you can utilize cloud-based backup. You can take advantage of disaster recovery. So if a server were to die, you can easily replace it and just connect it out to your Azure file share, and it just syncs down instantly. So I want to give you a quick demo of this. So here, So this is a Windows Server 2016 server with file server installed. And I've installed the Azure File Sync agent before the session. So what I'm going to show here is I'm going to open up my file server data. I have D sales. And I'm actually going to open up in parallel the Azure Storage account and actually show you that this is a syncing relationship. So I go to Storage account, click on the files, and then I have my sales share here. So you can see all the data is exactly the same. And to really prove it, I'm going to go actually change some stuff on the server. So I'm going to create a new text file here, just ZZZ, put it at the bottom. And I'm going to actually go and rename this folder. Yep. And then finally, I'll delete a file. And now as you can see on the right, these changes are going to propagate very quickly. So you see that ZZZ file right there at the bottom. And I'll do a refresh again, rename. And you'll notice that actually that file that I deleted has been propagated. So this is all happening near real time. We're taking advantage of the change notifications on file server to make sure that the sync replication happens very quickly. And so the next thing I'm actually going to demo here is a great feature that we call cloud tiering. This is what enables that cache. So you'll notice as I look at this file share, I have attributes off to the side here. And I have files that are grayed out. And what that O attribute means is offline files. So I'll right-click on this file here. And you'll see that actually size on disk is 0, but the full size is there. And that's because that data is actually stored out in the cloud. So I can actually seamlessly open this file, and our Azure File Sync file system filter goes and recalls it from Azure Files just instantly. But the really cool thing here is not that it can do that seamless download, but that files that do the so-called partial reads and partial writes can actually stream files down. So I'll go to this movie file, and I'll show you here quick, just size on disk, 7 megabytes compared to the full size of 23 megabytes. And keep an eye on that number, okay? So I'll go close that, open up the video. Looks like it's the first time I'm using Windows Media Player in this, so I'll click Recommended Settings. And you can see that this video is starting to play instantly, and you see that little icon in the lower left-hand corner? That means it's streaming from the cloud. I can skip ahead as I want, and this just jumps ahead with me. As you can see, it's pretty smooth and seamless. And now when I actually go and I look at the file properties, I can see that this file has actually downloaded a bunch of data just in the background without me even noticing. So this cloud tiering feature is ultimately the basis for a lot of the stuff that we're doing with Azure File Sync. It enables us to, like I said, recover file servers really fast when something goes south. And ultimately, make that file server a fast cache of your data for application performance, for application consistency. It feels just like a regular file server because it is. Thank you, Erin.
Great, thanks, Will. All right, So we talked a little bit about Windows Server 2016, the pillars that we have invested in, the importance of Windows Server and the hybrid story that we're offering, and some of the services that you see us delivering in an ongoing basis. We'll talk a little bit more and give you some sneak peek into some future ideas we have a little later in the deck. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Windows Server cadence, right? You know, it's important for us to, it's important for me, for you to know that our intent around Windows Server and the release cadence is that we want to be able to support the business needs that you have. And so we know that there really are kind of two different drivers that are motivating people when they think about deploying servers, right? There's a class of servers that you want to deploy on something that is long-term kind of, you're going to be deployed from a long-term point of view in your environment. Those are things that traditionally that we've done as you think about moving from Windows Server 2012 to 2012 R2 to 2016. But there are a new class of applications, right, and a new class of scenarios that require you to really move forward at a faster pace. Think of containers. Right? The innovation that's happening in the industry around containers is moving at a speed that if you were to wait for 3 years to deploy a new server, right, you would be so far out of date in terms of where the industry is at that point in time. And so we know that we need to also start releasing Windows Server on a faster cadence, right, in order to be able to move at the speed and at the pace at which the industry is pushing us to. And so that is the kind of background behind Windows Server joining what we call the semi-annual channel. You might be familiar with it as you think about the Windows 10 cadence and how it's been operating over the last several years. But we have really two different flavors, I'll call it, of Windows Server that we will think about releasing moving forward. On the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see I need to innovate rapidly, and that new semi-annual channel gives me access to that latest innovation. We're going to release twice a year. We'll follow the same cadence as kind of the Microsoft semi-annual channel, which includes Windows as well as Office. And that version of Windows will be supported in production for 18 months, right? And that is really to be able to give you enough buffer room so that you can skip one semi-annual channel release and move to the next, right? So we're not expecting you to every 6 months, right, move forward at that rate. You have some flexibility in terms of when you pull that in, but we are expecting you that you're moving forward and keeping current with us, right, on a regular basis. In order to be on the semi-annual channel, you need to be part of a software assurance or in Azure, and those channel releases will be named Windows Server plus a version. So the version we announced this week is Windows Server 1709. Right? If that does not work for you in your environment, we will continue to have the long-term servicing channel. And the long-term servicing channel releases every 2 to 3 years. It's more of what I would call that traditional release mechanism. And it's for customers that need more of that predictability, right? They want to deploy workloads that have maybe a longer duration in terms of operations in your environment. They have your standard, 5 years mainstream support plus 5 years extended, which you can extend through premium assurance. And they're available through all channels, all of the channels that you know of today. Now, what I believe, kind of in talking to the enterprises that I work most closely with, is that companies will have a mix of these two in their environment, right? They might have a large percentage of their environment that's on the long-term servicing channel, right? That's more on that traditional kind of 2 to 3 year cadence that they're moving forward. But they'll have pockets in their organization, both in the guest for container type applications, but also in the infrastructure, right? Because they have areas where they might want to take advantage of the improvements we're making in security, in shielded VMs, in the software-defined storage stack, all of those things where they do. And they might even use the semi-annual channel release in order to pilot out and prove out, right, the new features that are coming and test out that infrastructure so that when the long-term servicing channel comes out, they can then mass deploy it, right, and do the upgrade across the fleet that they have. So this is not a either or. This is really about providing you with the flexibility to meet the demands of your business, whether or not that you be a customer that falls into more of that long-term predictability or someone who wants to take advantage of more of that ongoing frequency. The features on the left, if you don't want to deploy the semi-annual channel release, I would still encourage you to sign up for our Windows Insiders, right? That kind of takes the place of our historical technical previews. so that you can see and get access to those features that we're rolling out in a more agile way, right? So that's kind of the basis of how you should think about, yes, we continue to have a long-term servicing channel, and we have this semi-annual channel that we've introduced, starting with Windows Server 2016. How this looks visually, if you kind of are like me, you want to see how this works across a timeline. So here I have the long-term servicing channel. It's released every 2 to 3 years. And if I build out, I think I'm getting too far away from the machine. It doesn't like me being that far over. So Windows Server 2016 is that long-term servicing channel. And then as we introduce Windows Server 1709, that's our second, essentially, semi-annual channel release, because the nano version of Windows Server 2016 was the first semi-annual channel release. It'll have 18 months of support, right? And we'll continue to release those twice a year as we go forward. And that feature set will then culminate in a long-term servicing channel release, the date of which is TBD at this point. I will say we did skip, right, if you're following the Windows 10 release schedule, we did skip the Spring Creators Update, right, because just of when Windows Server 2016 landed in the channel. And so you will be able to continue to use your Windows Server 2016 Nano install, right, for a period of time so that you can have that cutover and easy transition to Windows Server 1709. So the one other change that we are making as we move forward to Windows Server 1709 is that when we launched Windows Server 2016, we introduced Nano Server as a new lightweight, kind of smaller than server core offering. And we talked at the time about how we wanted that. It was both the basis for the container space, but also kind of where we saw the evolution of the host space going. And since then, I've talked to a number of you, as well as looked at the telemetry data that we have. It's very exciting for me on the engineering team that we get such a rich pipeline of telemetry on Windows Server 2016 deployments, because it gives me actual usage information to be able to base decisions against. And what we found when we were looking at both the customer experience as well as the telemetry data is it was kind of the Goldilocks scenario. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Nano Server was too big for containers and too small for the host. And so what we found is it really didn't excel for either of the scenarios. So what we've done with Windows Server 1709 is we've made the decision to scope the Nano Server release to be focused on containers. And we'll talk a little bit, Jeff's going to come up and demo some of the things a little later, but we've been able to make significant improvements in terms of both size and size on disk around Nano to fit that container space, and we really think that that's going to help from a startup time, from a density of containers, all of those pieces. And what we did when we made that decision, we then had to reintroduce server core onto the semi-annual channel. And we reintroduced that for 2 reasons. One, because we know that with Nano, from a container point of view, that does involve oftentimes rewriting your application. And so we want to provide a soft landing spot for those legacy or existing applications that you have moving forward. So we reintroduced server core on the semi-annual channel release for your container image for traditional apps and the VM host. And then we also introduced it to be the basis of the infrastructure roles that we will roll out as part of the semi-annual channel releases. And so, this was not an easy decision or a decision that we made lightly. It really was grounded in feedback we had from the community in terms of what best met your needs and the telemetry data that we had collected. So as you get onto the semi-annual channel release, you'll have these 2 options, Nano Server, Server Core. You notice that we do not have a full GUI version of server that is on the semi-annual channel release. What we found is the majority of people that are using those types of workloads are typically on more of that long-term servicing channel. So for workloads that you require the GUI on, our recommended deployment option is Windows Server 2016. And then for those scenarios where we think you're going to move forward and embrace that agility moving forward, then we have either Nano Server for containers or Server Core for containers or for the host. So as we then kind of move into what we're doing and what's new in the fall release 1709, we really have focused our investments in two pillars. The first is the hybrid application platform. That is, a continuation of the work that we did in Windows Server 2016 around containers, and we've got a lot of new enhancements there that I'll invite Jeff up in a second to talk about. And then the other pillar is around modern management. Jeff's going to come up and do a demo of some of our new management features, and my roots in server have actually been on the UI side of things. I started working on small business server eons ago, and I kind of moved and started to build that into server manager and whatnot. And so containers were my most excited feature of Windows Server 2016. The work that we're doing in the modern management space in Honolulu is definitely the most exciting feature that we have in this fall release. And so with that, I'm going to bring Jeff up to talk to us about both of these areas.
Thank you, Erin. Good morning. How's everybody? There we go. I'm on. Good morning. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Oh, come on. We can do better than that. How's everybody doing? Great. Awesome. So before we get into hybrid applications, let me ask you a few questions. How many of you have virtualized all your infrastructure? How many of you have been doing virtualization for about 10 years or more? Okay, all of you are raising your hands right now that have been doing virtualization for 10 years or more. You've probably seen me for the last 10 years. I'm here to tell you something. Containers are the same journey. Don't fight it. Don't tell me it's not happening. Don't poo-poo it because it's different. Don't tell me oh no, it's never going to work. Virtualizations are going to kill containers. And if you're in the container camp, don't tell me the opposite. Containers are going to kill virtualization. That's crazy. That's the whole, your chocolate's in my peanut butter. No, your peanut butter's in my chocolate. No, folks, these work great. They can be separate. They can work together. I can tell you we're going to be shipping both of these long after I retire, and I'm not retiring anytime soon. I'm here to tell you right now, we're at the beginning of the next 10-year journey when it comes to containers. Now, you can kid yourself. You can say, I don't need to learn any of that stuff. I'm happy with Vert. Please don't. If you want this to be on your resume, if you want to be an IT pro, you want to be successful, you want to be a cloud admin, you want to be a hybrid admin, and you want to help modernize those apps. And if you're that person in your organization that's dragging your heels and saying, no, we're not going to containerize anything, we're just going to leave everything in your VMs, you're going to quickly become that IT pro who used to change disks in servers in your infrastructure. And you know where that person is, right? Jeffrey Snover likes to say they're flipping burgers right now. I don't want you to be that person. It's an awesome shift. It is new, it is different, but it is happening. So what is new in 1709? Well, container optimized nano server image. As Erin talked about, we did have a Goldilocks problem. Nano server, both too big and too small. For IT pros, they said, you know, Jeff, nano server on hardware, I need a whole bunch of other things. There's no installer. There's no plug and play. There's no patch management. There's no updating. I need a whole bunch of stuff. You need to add all these things. There's no 32-bit support. I need you to add all these things to nano server. Well, when we looked at that, guess what it looked just like? Server core. Developers looked at it and said, hey, nano server looks really good, but it's not small enough. You guys got to get that thing even smaller. So we had a real, honest-to-goodness Goldilocks problem there. Nano server has gotten dramatically smaller, and I'll bring up the numbers in just a minute. But this is about increasing density, increasing performance, and most importantly, since you're updating containers very quickly, you actually care about the size of the image, compressed image for downloads, and you care about the uncompressed image for actual runtime. So size is actually quite important for containers. .NET Core. We've been doing a whole bunch of work to modernize .NET. Now, we understand there's a truckload of apps out there that require your traditional .NET framework. I'm going to show you that. We got a solution for that. Works great with containers. But for developers building new applications, again, they're looking for what do I need for writing optimal new cloud apps? .NET Core provides it and does it in a cross-platform way. Because we know that we live in a cross-platform world. SMB support for containers. Very excited about that. You saw Will do the demonstration about Azure Files. I'm really excited about the work we're doing to enable a whole bunch of new hybrid scenarios in Windows Server with Azure. But one of the other challenges you have with containers is how do you hook up storage? Because you're not actually keeping the storage inside the container, because when you stop and start a container, it's refreshed every time. It's brand new. So you've got to store it somewhere else. I need some durable storage. We want to make it easy for you to attach your containers to SMB storage, to those file servers you're already using. Guess what? Then you can use Azure File Sync as well. Get your bottomless storage. Linux containers. I've been so excited and so waiting for this. Trust me, for when we were working on Hyper-V isolation in Server 2016 for containers, you know, it was amazing. We did the work for Windows Server containers. We added the Hyper-V isolation to give you the peace of mind to deploy containers in a safe and sane way. People said, I want to deploy containers up in the cloud, but how do I know that I'm getting isolation? Well, I'm going to stick it in a VM. Well, now you've lost a ton of the benefits of taking it out of the VM and putting it in a container in the first place. So we added this super lightweight Hyper-V isolation. What was interesting was a number of people asked us, wait a minute, what is this Hyper-V isolation doing? And we explained that in 2016, we were sliding a Windows kernel under there so that we could run the container. And we were managing this all transparently for you. So you didn't have anything to do, and we just manage it. And by the way, when new container images come out, we just, all taken care of for you. Well, a number of you, astute folks out there, said to us, does that have to be a Windows container? And we all kind of said, well, this time it does. Not in 1709. 1709, what Linux container would you like? What flavor would you like? Red Hat, SUSE, Ubuntu, Alpine? Okay. It's an honest-to-goodness Linux container, by the way. Let's be clear. I've had a number of people say, is this that WSL thing? No, 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 no. This is an honest-to-goodness real Linux container. It's the same thing. It's the real deal. And you're getting the Hyper-V isolation that you want. Spoiler alert, when we released Server 2016, again, we released server containers and we released it with Hyper-V isolation. And we've been watching to see how people are deploying it. Guess what? The vast majority of you are using the Hyper-V isolation. Why? Because you want that extra isolation. You want that extra enterprise guarantee. You're used to the security and the extra isolation that virtualization gives you, so why wouldn't you just use Hyper-V isolation? Turns out most of you are doing that already. Well, our Linux containers give you that as well. And then finally, the Windows subsystem for Linux. When we released the Bash shell for Windows, WSL for Windows, the client, a number of people sent me emails saying, Jeff, you're bringing this to server. And I said, well, actually, at the time, it didn't make sense. Back in Server 2016, it didn't make sense. A lot of people said, why? And I said, because really, I want you managing these servers remotely. I don't want you logging into a server and bringing up a bash prompt. What would you do with it anyways? Because then you'd be jumping off to go manage something else. So it didn't make a lot of sense then. Now that we have Linux containers, and you have that bash automation that you're building, guess what? We absolutely want you to be able to use that with a Linux container, so it totally makes sense. So that's how we think of Windows Subsystem for Linux and why it's in 1709. All right, so let's get into enabling cloud apps with Nano Server and containers. The first thing I want to talk about is, what do you do for those existing apps? You're an IT pro. You work today in your organization, and you've got, Aaron mentioned a few thousand apps with BRK. By the way, I keep talking to company after company that tells me the same story. Jeff, we've got 500 of these legacy .NET apps. We've got 2,000 over here. We're working with a company that has over 6,000 .NET apps, .NET 3.5 to 4 whatever, on running anything from Server 2003 to 2008 R2 to 2012. And they're like, Jeff, how do we modernize these? And by the way, developers, spoiler alert, don't want to work on 15-year-old code. You want to upset a developer, tell them, we need you to crack the code on that 15-year-old software and try and modernize it. That's the quickest way for a developer to say, I'm going to look up for a new job because I want to work on new cool stuff. I want to work on the new cloud apps. For IT pros, this is an opportunity for you to take that existing application. Remember that whole P2V thing? Folks, this is next generation P2V, except it's for containers. Okay? You're taking those applications, you're literally using free PowerShell tools, Docker Convert, to convert these applications into containers and run them without any code change. Let me give you an example. We took a CRM application. You can see here, I'm going to use the Docker run command. This is on port 80. I am using Hyper-V isolation. This is the Fabricam fiber.web. This is just a very simple CRM application. Okay, use the Docker convert tools, by the way, and I'm going to fire this up right now. And this is running both IIS and SQL Server in containers. Going to the website right now, refreshing this, and here is the application. And in fact, I'm going to scroll here, you can see there's the application, here's the dashboard, and guess what? It works exactly the same as it worked on a physical machine or in a VM. There was literally no code change involved. We used the free Docker tools that we have up on GitHub and did this. Takes less than an hour. Guess what? This app is now in an image file. The IT Pro, guess what? You just became the hero in your organization because you just modernized an application and put it in a container. And by the way, this VM, using a couple gigs of memory, using many gigabytes of storage, it's using a fraction of that in a container. So now I can just stick this in the library, and if we do want to deploy this, we want to stick it up in Azure, run in a container instance, we want to run it on premises, it all just works. So that's one example. But let's take this to the next step. So let's switch on over here and go to the official Tomcat repository here on Docker Hub. All right, folks, this is a Linux container. This is literally running as is. So we're going to go over here and fire this up, running Docker run. This time we're running it, by the way, on the same server. This time it's on port 88. This has got a gigabyte of memory. This is running the Tomcat server. This is literally, again, no code change. This is running on the same server as my Windows container. I'm firing this up. I'm refreshing right now. And there is officially Apache Tomcat running in a Linux container on my Windows server at the same time using Hyper-V isolation. And there is my Windows Server container running side by side. And for giggles, let's fire up one more Linux container because, you know, who doesn't want Nyan Cat? Okay? I mean, seriously, who doesn't? So now I've got 3 containers. I've got 2 Linux containers, one running Nyan Cat, one running Apache Tomcat, one running Windows Server container, all running on the same server. By the way, these aren't in VMs. I didn't have to do any conversion. These are all running in containers. Quick, simple, and easy. All right, so I talked about Nano Server got a lot smaller. How much smaller did it get? Well, if you look on the left side, we've got the compressed numbers. Windows Server that shipped in 2016, the base image for just Nano Server was 383 megabytes. It's 78 megabytes. That is what developers are looking for. By the way, IT pros, they would have been screaming because we got it even smaller. And how did we do that, by the way? We actually reduced and took out more things that we didn't need in Nano Server. Because now that it's focused simply on running containers, we don't need a whole bunch of drivers. We don't need hardware drivers. We don't need a servicing stack. We don't need plug and play. There's a whole bunch of things you simply don't need in a container. So Nano Server, just like that, with no loss of functionality. With the .NET Core runtime, which is highly optimized, it's only 107 megabytes versus 413 before. And then if you look at Nano Server uncompressed, okay, now you're talking 195 megabytes and 262 at runtime. Okay, but the compressed one, which the developers are going to use because they'll be downloading new images, nice and small. All right, so next we get to management reimagined. So honestly, I'm crazy excited about this because this is something that I've been wanting for a very, very long time. I've wanted to reimagine the server remote experience. Okay, I want to deliver something that really makes this server simple and easy to use. In my world, the scenario is very simple. I would love to be able to tell you, hey, you know what, you got a remote branch office? Let's roll in a half rack. This thing's got 4 servers, it's got 8 servers, it's got a dozen servers. And by the way, they're all running server core. There's no GUI. And I hand you a surface, and I say, guys, you can manage all of that without ever touching the box. All touch-friendly, all HTML5. That's my vision. That's where I see the reimagining of server going. But it's not just that. What happens, sure, it's great for managing those instances on hardware, but the VMs as well. And more importantly, I want these to connect up into Azure. I want a hybrid experience as well. I'd like to be able to take advantage of the best of both worlds. What about those VMs that I do have running up in Azure? I'd like to be able to manage those from that same console as well, all nice and easy and touch-friendly. So, if you look at Windows Server today, this probably may look a little familiar to you. What are the tools you use? You're probably used to going to Task Manager, of course. You've got to see your CPU use, your utilization, your NIC speed, your memory, your disk. Of course, if you want more information, you're going to go into Resource Monitor to get additional information. You're, of course, going to bring up perfmon if you want to look at additional event logging and set up additional performance counters. You're going to probably bring up system information to get things like BIOS versions and firmware versions. You're going to go to Device Manager to make sure you got nothing wrong there. There's no alerts in Device Manager. You're, of course, going to use the command prompt, and of course, you're going to use PowerShell. And of course, for Server Manager, you're going to use that to add roles and remove roles and configure those. You're going to bring up, of course, your network settings to configure your IP settings for your NICs. You're going to use Disk Manager. Spoiler alert, this hasn't really changed much since Windows Server NT 351. Looks about the same. We modernized it teeny tiny bit. But for you, older folks out there, you feel comfortable with it because it literally hasn't changed, okay? But now we're not done yet. You're going to go to take a look at Event Viewer because you're going to want to look at security logs. You're, of course, going to want to take a look at the registry editor if you need to make some tweaks there. You're, of course, going to go to Windows Update to update your system. You have, of course, got to go to Explore to add directories, change directories, add a temp folder, things like that. And, of course, you're going to bring up, finally, your MMCs to do management. And what you're seeing here is just literally the organic growth of Windows Server over the years. And this tool, Swiss Army knife of Windows Server is honestly fantastic because everybody out there has a favorite thing that they do with Windows Server. People love their domain controllers. People love their file servers. People love Hyper-V. They love the scale-out file server. They love the traditional file server. Trust me, I don't know how many little branch offices love the print server, for crying out loud. Fax server, we're all going to agree that needs to die, right? We can kill that? Okay? I've been trying to kill this thing for like 3 releases. I'm this close, folks. I'm this close. Okay? Fax server going to die. I'm going to kill it with fire. Okay? My point being is, this is how it's organically grown. So we want to change that. We want it to be easier. We want it to be more flexible. So let's take a look. I got to swap machines for one moment here. And let's take a look at Project Honolulu. Honolulu is a reimagining of the server experience. It's talking about doing this in a new and different way. By the way, what you're seeing here is literally running on my Surface here. And spoiler alert, it's actually communicating back to 4 servers under my desk back at the office. Spoiler alert, they're all running server core. There is no GUI on any of these servers that I'm running back in the office. So I've got a bunch of servers, and you see I've got the couple ways that I've actually named these servers: silver nodes, red nodes, and green nodes. To break the code, just to let you know, silver node actually means it's running on hardware. So I've got 4 silver nodes, and they're all running on hardware. So let's take a look at my overview. Something I would typically go to, Task Manager for. Well, I can see here's the name, here's the operating system, here's my disk space, here's my memory. I can see that this is actually an HP system. It's got 8 logical processors. Well, some of the typical things you would do on a server, I don't know, maybe change the name, join a domain, things like that. Well, guess what? It's right here. I simply change my name, type in my credentials, and I'm ready to go. If you need to change environmental variables, you want to add things like remote desktop. Okay, yeah, I could actually RDP into the system from here, but it's running core, so I don't really need to do that anyways. But the things that I need to do, like restarting my physical system, actually shutting it down, I could do all of that from here. Now, of course, one of the first things you do on a server, of course, is you configure what's the role of this server. Because a server, out of the box, isn't configured with anything by default. This is long a misnomer. Everybody says, oh, server has this massive footprint. Yeah, it has a massive footprint, but out of the box, it's locked down by default. It's not doing anything. First thing you have to do is say, what is the role of this server? Is it a file server? Is it a print server? Is it a Hyper-V server? What is it? That's when the actual bits get enabled. So in my case, you can see, for example, I've already clicked on Hyper-V, and I've already installed it. But if I wanted to do something like, oh, I don't know, let's say I wanted to enable the host guardian service. I simply select on that. You can see I got my descriptions. I click on install. Guess what? It's calculating all the dependencies. Are there any other things? Yeah, it's going to need these additional things. Click on reboot. Click on yes. It will automatically install this, reboot it, set up, and ready to go. All remotely on server core. Pretty awesome. All right, well, what if I need to do additional things? So now I'm in roles and features. I would have switched from task manager to server manager. If I wanted to go take a look at event logging, I would then switch to event viewer. Well, no, not in Honolulu. I simply click on the event button, takes me into event viewer, and now guess what? I can take a look at, say, my security logs. Now you notice, wow, there's a lot of things here in my security log. I could easily get freaked out about that, but I'm not worried because I'm going to click on the filter button, and in fact, I don't need to see any of the verbose information. I just want to see any critical things, and so I'm going to apply that, and in fact, oh, I do have one single error, so I'll have to take a look at that. One audit event, I'll have to take a look at that later. But easy eventing, easy logging, all of this done, all in a very, oh, by the way, this is all HTML5, this is all touch friendly. By the way, you may be wondering, gosh, what did I need to install on those server boxes? How many agents did I need to install? It's all agentless. There are no agents. I literally installed Honolulu, which is a less than 30 megabyte download. I literally click, click, click through an MSI and fire up a browser. Edge or Chrome works just fine, even works on Mac for Safari on Mac, by the way. And guess what? I'm here. It's all just working. All right, let's continue just a little bit farther. What if I need to go add directories? So on server core, this is actually something that can be kind of challenging. Something as simple as I need to add a directory. Well, not for Honolulu. Let's go on over here to the file explorer here. And in fact, if I want to create a new folder, let's just call this temp2. Click on submit. And guess what? We've just created the folder and it's right there. So very quick, very simple, and very easy. If I want to set up my storage replica, if I want to look at virtual machines, I can do all that. In fact, I'm going to head on over here to Silvernode 4, where I'm running quite a few servers and quite a few VMs over here. Just point out here, I can click on my inventory. I can now drill into my VMs. I can see I've got a variety of different ones running. I've got Windows 10. You're probably thinking, yeah, Jeff, but what if you do have to log into a VM? You're not going to be able to do that from a web browser, right? Well, let's click on Connect. And guess what? It actually gives me an RDP file to open. And lo and behold, I've got to type in a password. And now I'm RDP'd into Windows 10. This is all running on server core, on my 4 systems halfway across the United States using simple, easy Honolulu management. This is a free preview right now. And by the way, it's going to be free. This is going to be a free download, folks. This is what Honolulu management is all about. It's about making remote management easy so I can manage Windows Server wherever it resides, whether it's in Azure IaaS, whether it's under my desk, whether it's in the data center, making it really easy to do modern remote management. So with that, thank you very much. Back to you, Erin.
Thanks, Jeff. And I'm just going to do a little plug. Jeff has a session right after this in this room. You don't have to go anywhere. He's going to go deeper into a bunch of these things. So if you are looking for more information, please stay into the next session. So with that, I thought I would just give you a little bit of a sneak peek at where we might be able to take Honolulu. We talked a lot about hybrid and how hybrid is critical and wanting to be able to kind of meet you on your terms and for you to be able to use your on-premises resources, but also then expand and leverage services that we have in the cloud. And so this is something that we have we're just exploring. This isn't working code. It's a design mock-up of where we might go. But if we look at the area of backup and replication, right? We really, when we hear that the cloud is a great destination for us to be able to back up the servers that I have on premises so that I have access to them at any point in time. And so here you can see through a few design mock-ups where if I'm in that project Honolulu, I have my list of servers, right? I could click on that server and I could actually get the configuration to be able to back that up using Azure Backup. Right? So right here from my on-premises UI, I can take my server, I can connect it up into Azure services that we offer in order to be able to take advantage of protecting my on-premises environment through Azure services like Azure Backup. So I would go in right from here within the Honolulu experience. I would log in. I would go ahead, I would set up my Azure backup, I'd give it the subscription ID, the vault, the resource group, location. I could then go ahead and, I'm too far away. I need to learn that I can't walk that far. I then go in and configure the backup settings, and voila, right? I have everything configured up into the Azure Backup Service. So that's just one example of how now that we have this experience, which I think if you look at it, you'll also realize it looks very consistent with the Azure Portal experience, so that you're using the same concepts, the same ways in which you interact, and you can switch kind of seamlessly between the management you're doing in Azure through the Azure Portal and what you do on premises through Honolulu. So just a little sneak peek about where we might be going with that. So to bring us into the home stretch, I'd like to invite Chris Van Wes up, my counterpart in the product marketing organization, up to talk a little bit about what we're doing in terms of the Azure connection and from a licensing and a feature functionality point of view to help enable these hybrid scenarios for you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Erin. So what do you guys think so far? It's pretty awesome stuff, huh? Clap. All right. So everything that we've shown you so far is designed to help with the digital transformation. You hear that over and over from Microsoft. Everybody's going through this notion of digital transformation. And so what we've been trying to show you here is, in fact, investments we're making to help you make that transformation and do it at a way that is appropriate for your business. And that's the key, because everybody's different. Everybody has a different need now and in the future. One thing that I wanted to make sure to land with this group is the value of software assurance relative to that digital transformation process. So the first thing, which is something that everybody's familiar with, is with software assurance, you get the rights to future releases of products as they come out. For example, Windows Server 1709, if you have software assurance on your current Windows Server licenses, you just get access to it. It's just that easy. And as we go forward with these semi-annual releases, you'll get access to those as well. But as we looked at what was really being required to help people take most advantage of what they're trying to accomplish in their data center, we realized that we needed to do a little bit more, and we decided to pack these new features and benefits into the software assurance package so that it just made it one simple thing for people to focus on. The first, which is in the middle here, is this benefit called the Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows Server. If you haven't heard about this one yet, it's a really important one, and I'd encourage you to take a note down, because the simple way to think about this is the least expensive way that you're going to be able to operate your Windows Server workloads in the cloud. And you do it at your own pace when it makes sense for you. What it basically says is that you get the rights, because you have software assurance on a Windows Server license, you get the rights to run a couple of Windows servers in Azure and only pay the base compute rate, which is the Linux price. You don't have to pay for the Windows IP. So it's a huge cost savings, and it's available when you're ready to do that. Whoops, almost missed the last piece there. The last one is on premium assurance, because we also know that there's a portion of your estate, of your applications, that have a very difficult time moving forward as quickly as we move forward with releases. When we got to the end of support for the 2003 wave of products, there was still a significant number of applications that were running on 2003 or 2003 R2. There still are some out there. And so what we decided to do was put in place a program called Premium Assurance, which for a small uplift, I think it's something like 7% this year, you get 6 extra years of support for that product. So you go from 5 plus 5 to 5 plus 5 plus 6. So if there are portions of your estate that are having a hard time moving forward, this is a very cost-effective way to ensure you still have those security updates, which, as you keep watching the news, the amount of hacks that happened on very old and unsecured systems just keeps growing. So this is an important feature that customers have been pretty excited about. So we'll drill down just a bit on the hybrid benefit for Windows Server. What this is saying is that you've already made an investment in Windows Server. And a lot of customers had come to us and said, gosh, Chris, I've already paid for it once. I just want to use it over here now. Why can't I make that happen? And we said that makes sense. Let's set up a benefit as a part of software assurance that allows you to do that. And so what you get to do is for every Windows server that has software assurance on it, you can use up to 2 virtual machines of up to 16 cores in Azure and just pay the base compute rate. So you just pay the Linux price for that machine. Now, this picture that you see here, the blue little coin at the bottom is meant to be the cost of software assurance. Because the point is that what you're talking about here on a standard server, a standard edition of Windows Server, it's like $150 a year or something like that. That benefit that you paid $150 a year for can then be applied to 2 virtual machines, which, you know, you get a D series VM, that might be thousands of dollars a year. So the amount of ROI, the return that you can get on that little investment for software assurance is absolutely huge. And so if you have any intention over the next 3 years to do anything in cloud involving Windows Server, Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows Server is definitely the way that you have to do it. It's not even a close comparison. And by the way, if you're paying attention earlier in the week, we announced Azure Reserved VM instances. So now if you're willing to make a commitment over time of 1 year, 3 years to Azure, that price actually goes from a 40% discount to up to 82% off of what you would pay just on the base hourly rate pay-as-you-go. So absolutely massive savings, and this is hands down the least expensive way to deal with Windows Server workloads in the cloud. So the next thing to talk about is the platforms. And I know it's everybody's favorite topic, but it is getting to be time to upgrade the platforms. I mentioned earlier that when we hit the 2003 R2 end of support time frame, there were a lot of people that were like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready to move yet. Still got a lot of applications. Well, we're getting close to the 2008 end of support as well, both for Windows Server as well as SQL. For Windows Server, what we're talking about is 2 years from this coming January is when the end of support moment is. And I know that seems like it's a long ways off, but everybody told us the last time we did this, we started a campaign around a year in advance of that moment. And everybody said that was too late, they needed more time. So what you're going to start seeing is by January, a purposeful campaign educating people about what they need to do with those 2008 instances. And there's still a lot of them out there. Most of you probably have at least a third or more of your estate still running on 2008. So it's time to start thinking about this. And the good thing is that we've got programs in place even now to help with this process. The first is the fundamental notion of migration. And we've gone through a pretty concerted effort, both with ourselves and then with a handful of select partners, to be able to help you literally do the discovery phase, understand what I have, map it out, where is it, what are its dependencies, things like that. Then go through the migration phase as appropriate. What does it make sense to move into Azure? What does it make sense to keep on premises? And then the optimize phase, and how do I actually take what I've now migrated and get the most out of it. And so you probably saw announcements around Azure migration. You can go out to our websites now and see a whole page dedicated to this concept. But I'd encourage you to just start thinking about this, because this is something that is going to get on your radar sooner rather than later as it needs to be dealt with. You also heard Aaron talk a bit about the MTA program that we've set up, Modernized Traditional Apps. And this is a partnership with Docker as well as with Avanade. And this has been hugely successful so far. We're just incredibly excited about it. It literally, the program is, hey, take a legacy .NET application, and within 5 days, they will come in, containerize it, and get it running up in Azure for you in a proof of concept mode. So within days, doing what Jeff was just showing you in terms of how quickly it is to take old applications, little or no code change, and get them running up in Azure. And what they're finding is that once people get exposed to it, they understand the process, they see how simple it was, they know things to look for that can be gotchas. Once they start learning those things, the floodgates start opening and it just becomes a lot easier to go through this process. And so I would encourage you, if this is something of interest to you, there's funding associated with this, reach out to your account manager, have them talk to us about getting you into the program. And this slide I think is worth showing because as you are trying to make the case back to your management as to why some of this migration and modernization work is important, know that at every stage of the process, there's a return that you should be able to see in your environment. You don't have to wait until you get to the very end of the process to show the ROI. For example, the simple act of containerizing an application is instantly going to get you benefits in terms of time savings. And so right out of the gate, your people should be able to do things a lot more quickly. Once you've done that, you have the opportunity to investigate what type of infrastructure am I actually running this on, because that's much more portable. You have the ability to consolidate what you're doing. You have the ability to refresh and put new hardware under that, or maybe move it out to the cloud environments. All those things become very possible once you've gone through the containerization process. It also gives you a chance to look at your methodologies. If you don't have a good CI/CD process in place, containers obviously lend themselves to that very nicely. It's kind of a mandatory part of how you work with them. That's a great opportunity to reinvest in your processes. And then finally, you can actually look at breaking apart portions of that containerized application and reconstituting it with microservices to get incremental benefit from the appropriate part of the application that you actually want to work on. So all the way through the process, there's good value to be had and discovered through this modernization effort. As we get to the end here, I want to make a pitch to all of you to get involved in the Windows Insider program. As part of the Windows Server business rolling back into the WGG kind of broader organization over the last year or so, we had the chance to participate in the Windows Insiders program. And this is the vehicle now through which we get previews out into the world. It's a great community involvement. It's a really well-run program because it's the Windows organization that runs it. But now we have Windows Server in there as well. So you won't see technical previews coming out or release candidates or things like that we did in the past. We are going to be putting releases through the Insiders program. So check it out, get involved. This is a great way to get early access to all these new features that we're talking about. And then one thing while you're here at the show, I would highly encourage all of you to come down to the expo floor. We've set up this cool Windows Server experience. Two things. On the outside, you'll see that there's all the different logos from over the years. We encourage you to grab a pen, sign your name at where you started working with Windows Server. It's been kind of fun to start seeing where everybody started their journey with Windows Server. And then on the inside, and you can register to win an Xbox as you go through this process, but we've got a really cool animated video that people have seemed to really like. So I would encourage you to sign your name, check out the video, enter to win an Xbox, and basically come down and hang out with us, because there's a lot of great people that are able to answer a lot of good questions, and we'd love to hear from you and hear what you're doing. So, as we wrap, first thing, join the Insiders program. That is the way that you're going to get access to the builds. That's the way that you're going to get all the new and latest information. Second thing, Project Honolulu. Was that awesome or what? Hopefully people really thought that that was a cool investment, technologies. That's something that we've been working on for a while. We heard the feedback from you guys, and I'm super excited to show you that it's starting to come together. And then finally, we've got two versions of Windows Server out there. There's Windows Server 2016 from last fall, and now we've got 1709 that'll show up in just a few weeks. So download them, check them out, give us your feedback. We'd love to hear about it. Please fill out your evals. I'm always shocked at a room with 1,500 people and you get like 100 evals. Take a few minutes. We really appreciate the feedback. If you liked it, just check, liked it. If you didn't like it, you can do the opposite. But to give us the feedback, because it matters. It helps us improve and really dial in what's best for you guys. I think we've got about 5 or 6 more minutes, so we're welcoming people that want to come up and ask questions. We can do that. Or we'll all be up here as well if you want to come up and chat afterwards.
Ask a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I got a question about containers, actually. That demo of showing, like, hey, I've got some Docker commands, I can run PowerShell. So it means I could take any container, any application pretty much and containerize it, right?
It needs.
There you go.
There you go. It's not necessarily any app. First of all, it's got to be GUI-less. Okay? There's no GUI in a container. Okay?
Right.
So it's got to be traditionally the apps that the biggest push we're seeing for apps are your old .NET applications, for example, Java apps, but things that have remote GUIs, remote management, because there is no GUI in a container. And again, .NET is where we're seeing like traditional LOB apps are the ones that are making that move.
Okay, because I guess the next part of that question is, does that mean Microsoft's going to do that for things like Exchange Server? So I could take, say, Exchange Server 2013, run that command, and make it a container?
That's a great question. So you're already seeing it with SQL Server. So Scott Guthrie announced it this week. We released the new version of SQL Server that actually has support for Linux, Windows, and it's in a Docker container. And in fact, we already have a few million downloads of SQL Server to Docker container.
Yeah.
Now, the important thing to understand is that's the SQL engine. Keep in mind that SQL has all other things that go along with it, reporting service, things like that. Not all of those make sense to go in a container, but you could still use those to remotely manage and things like that. So now we're kind of taking a look at our portfolio and trying to figure out which one of those do make sense to move into a container and which makes sense in this new architecture. So I can't speak broadly and say, hey, you're going to see everything go into a container. We got to kind of take a methodical approach to look through our portfolio and figure out which ones make sense. And honestly, listen to you to figure out what you'd like to see in a container as well. Because honestly, Exchange has this rich development history. Do we want to take 10, 15, how many years of development behind Exchange and try and spend the next many years putting in a container when most people are moving to Office 365? That's an interesting engineering investment.
I guess it was just more the point was you kind of make it sound like, oh, you can get an application to container with no changes, but no, it kind of does take changes.
It has to be the right application.
If
For a large percentage of the applications, they do not require changes.
Yep.
Okay.
But it has to be the right application.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks. You want to go over here?
Great question, and I will talk about that more in my session coming up at 10:45 in the same room.
Any plans to backport Honolulu to older versions of server?
To backport support?
Yeah, so you can manage
Honolulu can actually manage all the way back to 2012. The stuff that I've shown you, and again, I will spend a ton of more time talking about this in my session at 10:45, but Honolulu can actually manage all the way back down to 2012 from the server management experience. It does. There's a couple of different dependencies for Honolulu because it does more than just server management. There's HCI and there's failover cluster manager, and I'll talk about that more in my session.
Thanks.
You bet.
So you've been accessing Honolulu through a browser, right? Where is the web server? Is it on the target server that you're managing or somewhere else?
Great question. It actually can be installed in a variety of different ways. I'm actually running it right now on my Surface directly, everything here. I could actually run it, though, also on my target server on one of my Hyper-V servers as well. So you can actually configure where it runs. It can run locally on one of my, so say I've got a 4-node hyper-converged infrastructure. I could actually have, it's so lightweight, I could have it just running on one of those Hyper-V servers so that I could manage it remotely, or I could actually put it on my box directly, or I actually put it on a separate box directly in the middle as well. So it's actually very flexible from an architecture standpoint.
So the server is talking to the target servers through like legacy remoting protocols like remote registry, WMI, those things.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that. One more time?
If the web server is not on the same box as the server you're currently managing, is the web server of Honolulu talking to the target server over all those legacy remoting protocols that we know and love?
It's using PowerShell and WMI.
Right.
Oh, I see. Remote PowerShell, basically.
Oh, yeah, none of that legacy stuff.
Yeah, PowerShell WMI.
Got it.
Secure.
Thank you. About those containers. So the promise is that you take an application that has been running happily on Windows 2003 for some years, you place it in a Windows 2003 container, and you deploy that container on a Windows 2016 box, right?
Well, you wouldn't put it in a 2003 container because 2003 can't be containerized. You'd put it in a container running 2016 server core, for example. That's what you'd do.
But then you kind of have to retest everything. I mean, what's the big benefit? The application gets a new environment anyway, so you might just as well plop it on a 2016 VM?
No, great question.
Yeah.
So the question is, I've got an existing app running a .NET 3 app. I'm actually working with a customer right now, a .NET 3 app running on Server 2003 R2. What's the benefit of me taking that out, dropping it in Server Core, running it in a container on 2016? The benefits are many-fold. Number one, you're now running on a supported OS, 2003 long out of the OS. Number two, just by moving it into 2016 without doing a single other thing, we just upped the security by so much you can't even believe it, because we've added all of the new kernel protections. We've added Defender, which is built in there. We've added all of the credential guard, remote credential guard, all of those things that you never had in 2003, and your performance will skyrocket compared to what it was running in 2003.
And then the last thing I'll do there is that you also now started to bring it into more of a DevOps style workflow. So your developers, if they are still making changes on that, so probably not with your 2003, but maybe a 2012 application, right? They can do all that in environment in Visual Studio. We've integrated, added Docker support in there. And so now they're developing in the exact same environment that you're going to push into production, so you avoid any of those challenges of I've coded to some local environment variable and it's not in my production server. So we've started to really modernize that process.
Think about how many times a developer writes something
I get the benefit of moving to a new operating system. I don't get the benefit of doing that within Docker.
Because the container now, right, it doesn't have the full OS in it. You don't have to manage that instance. It's self-contained. The developer can actually use that as their unit of deployment, right? So there's a ton of benefit that comes probably more from a developer point of view than necessarily from an IT point of view, but still, the deployability of that as a unit as opposed to it being an application running on an OS that you've got to manage, you've got to service, you've got to patch, all of those types of things.
But now the developer has to patch the container, doesn't he?
You don't patch the container, right?
Well, they just take a new image, new base image, and you build up upon that and redeploy that, but that needs to be done by the developer, and you know how reliable they are.
Yeah.
They're not on call on Saturday.
So then you can choose, right? So
I'm a developer right now.
I think what we're doing is providing that benefit. So we do. So we are at time right now, but we are going to hang out here. So we're just probably going to move from mic questions to here just so that we give Jeff some time to set up. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We got like at least 6 folks that have questions, but come up to the stage and we'll answer.